myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you.
Good morning and welcome to NUFC Matters. As promised, a couple of different ones on Saturday morning. We had Glenn McCrory about 10 minutes ago. You can catch up with that on the playlist. And it's a big welcome to a good friend of mine, Richard Booth. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Steve. Nice to see you.
And you, mate. A lot of my viewers will be well accustomed to Glenn McCrory's name, but not accustomed to yours. You've just brought a book out with Charles Salvador, who is also a very good friend of mine. And you've brought out a novel called Broadmarsh, Frankie Johnson's journey from a cell to the depths of hell. Relentless and Unforgiven. That's the cover. You can pick it up on Amazon, and it is a fantastic read. And I know you're going to give us a couple of chapters, a couple of readings from a chapter at some point during the broadcast. But let's start off a little bit about you first, Richard. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, since leaving school in 1988, I've been involved in music business. So I've been a tour photographer and toured with many bands, big bands as well, since that date. Spent many years touring with BB King, doing his tour photography and running his fan club. I've done fanzines for people like Nirvana, Kiss, and currently I do tour photography with bands such as Slash, Steel Panther, Alter Bridge, Hollywood Vampires, which is the new band with Alice Cooper, Joe Perry and Johnny Depp. Obviously, COVID has had a knock on the head with sort of live touring. But apart from that, I work at a college. I'm the ILT coordinator supporting staff at a college in Shropshire, Shrewsbury Colleges Group. And my first book came out back in 2015, which was a tribute to BB King, who was a really good friend of mine. That was my tribute. And then this is my second book, but Charlie's 19th, and it's our first novel. So it's our first venture into writing a novel as opposed to sort of, real life sort of information. So, and it's been fantastic experience for both of us.
Well, tell us about Charlie first of all. I mean, I know Charlie very well. I got to know Charlie 20 years ago. Well, over 20 years ago now, and it's been an up and down relationship, as sometimes friendships can be. But he is quite a character. For those watching, tell us a little bit about how you got to know Charles Salvador.
Okay, it stems from sort of 5 years ago, maybe a bit longer. I've also received funding of the tune of £500,000. So I've been producing resources to support young offender learners across the UK and Europe. Part of my project sees partners across Romania and Belgium. And we create interactive resources that ultimately long term would mean that prison learners will have access to resources in cell. So when they're on lockup 23 hours a day, they can still take part in education. And at the very early infancy of the project, I always knew from being a fan of Charlie's art that I wanted to use some of his art and obviously his words of inspiration to young offenders, because there's nothing more than capturing somebody who spent almost 46 years incarcerated in prisons across the UK to sort of let young offenders know, don't follow my route, don't go down my path, stay out of trouble. And then, I got in touch with Charlie really early on, and he said, I want to get involved with that. So I used some of his artwork, I used some of his words as inspiration, which have been used across prisons across the UK and some of those resources across Europe and the wider scope. So that sort of stemmed our early part of our friendship, and we've been really good friends ever since. We visit, as I have with yourself, Steve, to visit Charlie up till lockdown. I visit every month. We speak on the phone 2-3 times a day. We've become really good friends. We've got a real sort of keen interest in similar sorts of music, poetry, writing. And behind the public mask, I see a really interesting, intelligent person who's, I think, long served his time and, should be out, and I know a lot of people don't agree with that when they think of people and their crimes. He was the first person to realise that he was a bad lad at the time, and he served his time now, and I think it's time for him to be released. I see a really interesting person who does a lot that a lot of people don't see, does a lot for charity, and he's just an interesting person, and we got on really well, and I'm really pleased and sort of honoured to be a good friend of his.
Yeah, I mean the relationship starts obviously with a letter, and then you get in to meet this person. I mean it's not an easy process to go and visit Charlie, is it?
It's not at all, and I knew as well when I was doing the project. Obviously, you have to go through police visits. It has to go through sort of strict security to make sure you are who you say you are, and you're doing it for the right reasons. Yeah, it's a long process. You have to do application. The application for security has to come from Charlie. Then it comes to yourself. You have to fill all the paperwork in. You get a police visit. Once it's okay, then you can get on the visiting list. And yeah, I mean, earlier on when I was visiting Charlie, obviously he was in solitary. So all those visits early on in the earlier days from, like your Wakefield and Franklin up in Durham were all behind closed glass. There was no association as such. And we're really sort of fortunate now is at Wood Hill, we can have open visits where we sit in the same room, have a cup of tea and a chat. And that just shows progression and what he's done to work hard to get to that progression. I think early on he was on a 6-man unlock. Now he's on a 2-man unlock, and we can sort of sit and almost be as normal as possible when you think about the constraints that he has within the prison institution and his history. So, it's he's come a long way, and I think projects like this keep him on a good progression. As you well know with the poetry book you did, he loves the challenge of varying things. And the prison book you did that came out last year. He's very prolific with his poetry and his writing. He's won a lot of the Koestler Awards. Anything that helps him to progress and keeps him interested is a bonus. And I'm really pleased to be involved in this first of many partnerships for books that we've got to produce in the future.
What was that first visit like for you then, Richard? I know mine. I mean, I'd known Charlie over 20 years, so I was lucky enough to be, a visitor with yourself and another friend of ours at the time. And it was surreal for me because I'd known him 20 years. I'd corresponded with him for 20 years. I'd spoken to him on the phone over 20 years. I'd actually interviewed him years ago on the phone. And I'd never met him. I'd never met the guy, and I'd seen footage of him on videos and stuff, but never met him. So for me, it was a bit surreal, and very much like going in to visit the Krays. For me, it was meeting somebody who'd essentially become a prison icon. And for me, it was a wonderful experience. He was, first of all, I was surprised I was slightly taller than him. But, the build on Charlie, because of his wonderful training regime in prison, is just something that, I hope I've got when I get to that age. But it was just a great visit. It helps because you're going in with somebody like yourself and the other guy we went with, who essentially were, used to going to see him. And I wasn't scared of going to prison. I'd been on many prison visits to see many other prisoners in the time. But it was just a good laugh. I mean, he is just an ordinary guy, down to earth, very friendly, loves to have a chat, loves to know about you, loves to know what you're doing. When I went to see Reggie Cray in prison, a lot of it was about him. That was his way of getting through his sentence. But with Charlie, he's very interested in you as a person, what you're doing, what you're up to. You get the same experience as me going out and about. He want you to describe where you are, but go back to your first visit. What was it like?
Okay, yeah. I think I echo your words as well. It was quite surreal. I mean, obviously we'd spoke. We'd communicated via letters, and you can never understand that anticipation because obviously, like you said, you see people on TV, you see them on videos, you see them in photographs, but until you meet with them face to face, unfortunately for ourselves, it was a closed visit, so it was behind glass. But I think the whole process of arriving at the visitor centre that day, it was a cold morning, going through visitation, going through security checks. And obviously with Charlie, you don't get visits in the main visiting wing. You have to go down in the CSC, the secure unit. And then you're brought down in this little sort of area between glass. Two guards bring you down one side, you're behind the glass, and then you get the anticipation. You can hear Charlie down the corridor before you even see him. You could hear him, whoa! And, six guards sort of bring him in and check you out. And then in he walks with his dark glasses on, lives up to his sort of wording that people think of him. But like you said, he's just a pleasant guy. And the first thing he did was do the virtual handshake because we couldn't shake in person. put his glasses down, and the first thing he said, "How are you?" You know, and he, as you said, he wants to hear about you. He's fascinated with people, what you've been doing, what time did you get up this morning to come down, to go up to Durham, was it cold, what time will it take you to get back, what time will you be back? And then we just had a chat, we were just chatting as we are now, and it was just, he puts you at ease. And I think that's the one thing, is because you're real people, there's no facade behind you. He sees that in people, and I think we hit it off straight away. And a lot of them early visits were just like that. It's just the latter ones have been great up till lockdown, because you can sit down, shake hands, you talk, and it's just like having a chat with your friends in the pub or, in a restaurant. It takes away that element that they're behind closed doors and you're in the free world. We both sat there for that specific period of time, for those 2 hours. It's like you sat at home talking to somebody in your front room. And I think it's that hint of realism that makes it normal. It sounds strange, but to make it normal. But yeah, that first meeting was exciting. We hit it off. The 2 hours just flew by. I mean, they just flew by, and we chatted about everything. The project. He was interested in the project I was doing. That was the early initiation of why we got in touch. And then we were talking about everything, art. How he was. Get into different prisons so we could have the open sort of visits. And yeah, it was just a great experience. And he phoned me up that night afterwards and said, "Did you get back okay?" And we just chatting, saying, "Can't wait for the next visit." And it just stemmed from there. And I've visited every month ever since. And yeah, just you see the real person. You take away the public mass that people have of him and their experience. They just think of the criminal and the crimes, but they don't see the real person now, sort of 46 years on, who I think has progressed really well. And yeah, I'm proud to say he's a really good friend of mine, as you are as well. And yeah, it's real. End of the day, yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. It is very real. For those watching who maybe don't know who Charles Salvador is, of course, he was originally Michael Peterson. And a photograph of him there as a young man, around about the time of his, first wedding to Irene. But obviously, throughout his life he did turn to crime, and unfortunately for him, he's been a victim of his behaviour more in prison than being a criminal. I mean, what was he actually locked up for, Richard, originally?
Originally, he was locked up for armed robbery at the age of 22 in 1974. He was serving that time. He got 7 years for that in when he was 22. And ultimately, he was released in 1992 for some total of 53 days, of which then the police arrested him, saying he was planning another robbery, which he wasn't. And then he got 8 years. And after that, then, as you said, a lot of his crimes then stemmed from what happened on the inside, because he was the first to admit he was a bad lad, and he deserved the terms he got. But after that, the treatment he got in prison, which a lot of prisoners get, harsh treatment from prison officers and varying cons and what have you. I think a lot of his crimes stem from that, and he endured a lot of beatings and a lot of antagonising. And I think a majority of people wouldn't have reacted any differently, I would imagine. And yeah, it's just a shame. Obviously, when he had his spell in Broadmarsh, when he was sent there, I mean, obviously he was injected with your liquid cosh, to control prisoners and sort of inmates. And I think that sort of built up, played on him. And like I said, I think when they're quick to judge people for what they have in their sentence and how they treat people while they're incarcerated. But unless you're in that position, you don't know if you do anything differently. So I think a lot of his crimes, as you mentioned, were subject to him being in prison, and that has now stemmed from, to the current situation. The last few years, he's doing really well. He's on a good progression route. But those early years, did have a big effect on him. And it's testament to the man now that he's actually lasted. A majority of people probably wouldn't even have coped with all that hardship and treatment and what have you. And like I said, he's the first to condone anything. He knew he was a bad lad, but I think a lot of that is attributed to other people and the way they treated him, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, obviously, when he was in Broadmoor, he became probably more renowned to the British public for the riots, the rooftop protests and
Rooftop
stuff like that,
process.
And I mean, that picture there of him up on the roof and the amount of damage that was done is probably why the prison system and the hospital system were, injecting him and doing that. And he was a young
Yeah.
lad. He was rebelling against the system, and he's not that person anymore. And I think the fact that he changed his name from Peterson to Charles Bronson was a reflection of his mental state at that time, and
Yes.
he said to me, and I'm sure he said to you on more than one occasion now, Charles Bronson is dead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he still keeps that tagline. I mean, no matter what information gets put in the papers, I mean, even while we're promoting this book, he's been Charles Salvador for many years now, but still they have the strapline on the titles Bronson. And he can't escape from that, even though he's disassociated with that period of his life. He doesn't regret much in his life, but he wants to move away from it, hence the name Charles Salvador. But that still sticks with him. And I think a lot of people, as soon as you speak to people and they say, "Oh, you've done a book with who's Charles Salvador?" When you mention, "Oh, you mean Charles Bronson?" Well, yeah, like you said, Charles Bronson element is dead now, and he's trying to change his ways, change his name, just so he can become back in society and live a life doing his art. And I think he's more than served his time. His tariff was up years ago, and you do see a lot more criminals who've done harsher things. Obviously, Charlie's never murdered anybody or things like that, but you see people who get released after a minuscule sentence, whether, Charlie now, 46 years almost in, still keeps that tagline that he's tried hard to remove, Charles Bronson. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things, I think, that it suits the narrative of the newspapers. I've discussed this with him on a few occasions, and Bronson sells papers, maybe Salvador at this moment doesn't, but the artwork is fascinating. And I mean, I've only put a couple of clips up there of photographs of different bits of artwork, but it's a very particular style, and art, of course, is an acquired taste. I really do like Charlie's art. It's something which I feel will take him onto a different level once he gets out. What's your take on his artwork? Are you a fan?
Yeah, I've been a fan of his artwork for many years. Like I said, that's one of the reasons why I wanted him to be involved with my young offenders project to create art and resources. Yeah, I mean, I studied art, I trained in art, I used to be an art teacher, I do art myself, and I do have a love of art, and I do like his art. It's very detailed, and I think when people look at it, like you said, art's like Marmite to people. Either they like it or they hate it. But I see a lot of, obviously that stems from his mind, and obviously with the build up over the last 46 years of how he's been treated inside. I think he releases that out in his artwork, and it does come from the heart. And I think a lot of his art is very detailed indeed. And every time you look at every square inch of what's on there, you see something different. There's a lot of imagery in there. I've been a big admirer of his art for a hell of a long time. Some of the earlier pieces obviously are not as detailed, but that's how he began his journey as an artist. And it all stems from Mike O'Hagan, who was a prison officer, who said to him, "Have you ever done any artwork?" He said, I can't draw. And he gave him a pen and paper. And over the last God knows how many years, he's now started to create his own style. And it's very unique. And yeah, he's got a lot of fans with his artwork. A lot of the pieces, obviously, he's limited by the size of the paper he can get in prison, but some of his artwork has been A3 and bigger, and it's just a beauty to behold. Whether it's a smaller piece or a bigger piece, there's something in there. And his style changed somewhat when he was in Frankland a few years ago, because they refused him to have any paper, any of his paints or pencil. So he did a lot of his artwork just in biro. And it was amazingly detailed. And I think the man adapts to his surroundings and adapts to what he's been given. But like yourself, I've been a big fan of his art, and I'm really pleased he's done art specifically for the book for Broadmarsh as well. We've used some art that he's produced over the years just because it fits in within the sort of mental asylum institution artwork that's on there. But some of the art is purposely produced for it. And I love it. And I think with this book we've brought out as well, not only is it a novel, and I think we've moved away, we've created something very unique because it's slightly bigger than the paperback, but throughout of it, it's profusely illustrated with Charlie's artwork. So you get this visual narrative as well. And yeah, I think it sets it apart from other novels in that respect, and we're both very proud of it.
Well, I mean, in the description box that you can see below, I have put the link where people can buy the book. But I've also put the stuff which is on Amazon, the intro to the book, and it's fascinating. Broadmarsh, of course, it's a fictional book, but it was built back in 1948 to house the criminally insane, and hundreds have died behind the walls. Tell us a little bit about the book, Richard.
Okay, so the book came. I'll just tell you how it came about. Really,
Yeah.
About a year and 3 months ago, we were on a visit, and Charlie said, "How do you feel about writing a novel?" And I said, "I've never thought of it, but yeah, I'm up for any sort of challenge." So the sort of seed was planted in that visit, and as soon as I got home that night, he phoned me up and he said, "Do you fancy that? And should we do it?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." So that was a year and 3 months ago, and we started writing. So we were backwards and forwards on phone calls and sort of snail mail. With chapters and drafts of things, and said, "What do you think of this?" And then I was adapting it and what have you. And a lot of the book was penned during lockdown. And Charlie said all along, which is a great quote as well. He was saying, a lot of the book was produced during lockdown, and we turned something which was a total negative into a positive. And even during lockdown, we were producing the book, and I added chapters to it, added his artwork as the visual narrative, and it stemmed from that. So we're really proud that we've produced something in such a short time, but still has had a positive effect from the horrible COVID-19 and the whole of the pandemic. We've got something positive on it, and and we've produced something very special and unique, and that has stemmed now our partnership for, one thing Charlie said was this was our first partnership novel, but it certainly won't be our last. And we've got some other goodies in the pipeline over the next year or so. And yeah, as we had on the advert, it's relentless. And Charlie said, and I said, when people have read it, you just don't know what's coming next. It's this roller coaster ride. So Broadmarsh, as you mentioned, was built in 1948. Frankie Johnson, who's the main character, had a horrible upbringing in his life. He was born in 1933, so it was pre-war. His mum, not to give a lot of it away, his mum died giving him life. So as he was born, his mum passed away, so he didn't really know his mum. His father and his grandfather were sort of petty criminals, and for their sort of crimes and armed robberies, they hung in Wandsworth jail. So growing up, he was raised by his 4 sisters, and obviously that has had a horrible effect on anybody growing up. But during the sort of war years as well, and all the depression and varying things, it was a pretty grim time, and especially in London. So he was an angry young man who looked up to his father, but didn't have a really good outlook in life. So he was becoming a very angry person. And a lot of the book stems from post-war years. So it's 1956. So Britain is still coming out of the horrible result of the war, the Second World War. The depression was still hanging on there. And it was a pretty dark, dank place, London. And Frankie just ended up snapping and having a disagreement with a gang of people in the pub, and ended up killing a fair few people. And for that, he went to the Old Bailey, where the judge wanted to kill him. Obviously, he said from his horrible, horrific crimes, he should hang, but he was spared hanging and was sent to Broadmarsh for an indefinite period. And the people who went to Broadmarsh, it only sort of housed 20 people, were the people who committed the most horrendous, heinous crimes at the time. But because of a reason of insanity, they couldn't hang him for those crimes he permitted. So he was in Broadmarsh. And Broadmarsh is probably one of the worst places imaginable. Due to the Secrecies Act, people who went there are forgotten about. And it meant then that people could be experimented on. Had a worse sort of aspect of I think they wish they would have been hung, because the way that they're treated in there is a horrible place. It's a dark, dank place. People are experimental with sort of lobotomies and various treatments that they had at the time, and they were forgotten people. And Frankie Johnson knew he had to escape from there, otherwise he'd meet the similar fate to all the other residents. It would be death. So he planned his escape. And after that, then is a whirlwind roller coaster ride. He's basically on a killing spree. nothing and nobody at that time can stop him. And the rest of the book is just sort of relentless. But during that as well, you also see that he has a bit of compassion. He finds a bit of love, and I think that changes his outlook. But maybe down the line in the book, it might be too late for him, but that's for the reader to sort of uncover. But yeah, it is a relentless, non-stop ride, and I think some people will feel sorry for him. I suppose it's similar to sort of Charlie's outlook, even though it's nothing to do with it. People don't know the situation until they're actually in those people's shoes, and would they do anything differently? But yeah, it's just a relentless ride through Mad Frankie Johnson's mind and what he has to encompass really throughout his life. And yeah, we were really pleased with the result of it. Obviously, we had to take ourselves to some dark places because that's not something we've experienced before. So yeah, it was quite a process to write it, because obviously that's sort of a mindset we don't put ourselves in. But we hope with what other people have seen with the pre-sales of the book, that the result has been fantastic. We've been overwhelmed with what people have said and reviewed of the book after they've read it. And yeah, I hope other people find the same as well. It is about Broadmarsh, but it's also about this person who's grown up to be, you know, a disturbed child into somebody then who doesn't care what happens to him. Really, he's on a one-man war with the world.
Where did the name Broadmarsh come from?
Charlie made that up. A lot of people have said in sort of the press, it's based upon Broadmoor, isn't it? And we said, no, it's just a fictitious place. But the way we've described it in the book, and obviously we described it in Yorkshire, in the Yorkshire moors, people are going to be left at the end of the book thinking, well, was Broadmarsh a real place? You know, it was due to the Secrecy Act. Was it there? You never know. It might raise the sort of Yorkshire as the sort of tourist destination to wonder if Broadmarsh is there. But we've used real photos of Frankie Johnson, even though he doesn't exist. So there's a touch of realism there where people will think, well, he must have been real because there's a photo of Frankie Johnson, and a lot of places we described in the book, sort of pubs and places and spots are real. So there's a touch of realism. The streets we described existed. They existed in 56. But yeah, it's totally fictitious. But people will wonder at the end, you know, is it real? And we sort of left that open for people's interpretation when they've read the book.
I think the hope would be to get it dramatised. You know, if the book's a success, it sounds like one of those things you'd love to watch on Netflix.
Charlie said all along, when I presented some of the chapters to him, he said, "Oh, this would be great on the big screen," you know. And we've even had sort of talks about who would direct it and who would star in it. And yeah, I think it would translate very well on the screen as a screenplay in a film, or even a dramatisation on the TV. Yeah, I think it would do, and that's one of our long-time goals, is to maybe try and get it on the big screen. But it would work very well. And yeah, it'd be amazing to see that.
Obviously, Charlie has had a film made about his life. Bronson, Tom Hardy, of course, the man who also had the honour, I suppose, of playing Ronnie and Reggie Kray, took the lead role as Charlie. What was your take on the film?
I thought it was really well done. Tom Hardy played an amazing role of Charlie in that production. I mean, ultimately, it was a really good journey through Charlie. I mean, some of the aspects of the film, I think, were more dramatised than others in his real life. But yeah, it was a really well put together film. And like I said, Tom Hardy, there's nobody I could think who could play Charlie as good as Tom did. He did an amazing performance, and I think it really set him on the scene as well through his acting career. But I know Charlie really admired Tom for that, and I know they spoke at great length before the film was made, and he visited Charlie a few times just to try and get Charlie's mannerisms and the way he moved, and I think he encapsulated that very well indeed. Yeah, I do like the film. It is harrowing to watch, but again, that is a reflection of Charlie's life as he experienced through prison in these earlier first 20 plus years of being incarcerated. So yeah, Tom did an amazing role in that. The
film was very Clockwork Orange, I felt, you know, that had that kind of feel.
It did. It was raw, and obviously it didn't have a huge budget, but I think they produced that to its full effect for what they had available to them at the times. And yeah, as you said, it was very Clockwork Orange. It was very Kubrick-esque,
Yeah.
and I think that led to it being such a successful production as well. I think that, because it was quite raw, and the way it was directed and the way it was shot with the music as well. It's a great film, and I'd urge anybody to watch it if you want to understand a little bit more about Charlie, because you'll see that in that film.
Yeah, Charlie does keep himself fit. I mentioned it right at the start of the podcast, and it's not unusual sometimes on a visit for him maybe to knock a few press-ups or sit-ups out. I mean, it's an amazing feat, not only to keep yourself mentally right, but physically right, isn't it, when you're in the situation that he's found himself over the last 45 years?
Absolutely, and more testament to the man when you think about his conditions at Broadmoor. He put on weight because of the drugs they were giving him. He lost a lot of that weight, and obviously being confined to your cell, you don't, and especially in these solitary conditions for 40 years or so, he has no access to gym work. So a lot of it stemmed from his cell work. So a lot of push-ups, a lot of sit-ups, a lot of pull-ups, and indeed producing his book while he was in prison, Solitary Fitness, which was saying to people, you don't need big gym gear. You can do it from the confines of your front room. And that's been a really successful book, and a lot of people have actually took on Keep Fit as a result of that book, and write to Charlie still now saying, I've been following your regime in Solitary Fitness, and I've gone ridiculously fit, I've lost weight, and it is a testament to him, really, because if you think about it, the amount of press-ups and sit-ups and what have you, and as you said, on visits, I remember on a visit a few probably 6 months ago, when we were talking, because I do a lot of boxing, we've had the odd spar, which not many people can say they've walked away from Charles Salvador. But I remember on one visit, he said, you want to do balance. Balance is what you need. And I remember just getting out of his seat, standing on his head and just lifting himself up from nothing, He astounds me. He always astounds me. He's a very fit guy, and even at 68, he'll put a lot of 20, 30-year-olds to shame. And he still keeps fit now. Even the other day, he said, I was out on the yard and it was cold, but it was wonderful. I did me workout, did me press-ups, I had a run around the yard, back in my cell doing that. And it's a testament to the person, I think, his commitment to whatever he's done. A lot of men probably wouldn't have done that. They'd have thought, I'm in prison for life. Who cares what I do? But he's always kept that mental focus. And like I said, you got to take your hat off to the man. I don't think many people would have done that. But he's inspired a lot of people, not just in his writing and his artwork, but for Keep Fit. And like I said, Solitary Fitness was a really, and still continues to be, a successful book for people to be inspired.
I know you've got the book there in front of you, and you said you would kindly read an extract from it. So would you mind doing that, Richard?
I will do, yeah. What I'll do is, I had a few different chapters I said I was going to read, but what I'll do is, I've got a few pages, which is centered around, I think it's chapter 6, which is Broadmarsh, and read just to get a feel about what it's like there. This is stemmed after Frankie Johnson was sent to court for his crimes, his early on crimes, and this is when he left the Old Bailey to go to Broadmarsh. So I'm going to read you a couple of pages which just sort of sets a scene about his first second stepping into Broadmarsh. Okay. On arrival to Broadmarsh, Frank was met by a dozen guards. Not one of them was under 6 feet and 200 pounds. They looked like a Yorkshire rugby team or a group of hardened prize fighters. They were all dressed in black with highly polished boots. In fact, they were psychiatric nurses, elite power men who were all trained in the deadly art of self-defense and inflicting the most brutal of pain to others. Frank was taken to the admissions ward where he was removed from the straitjacket and freed of the muzzle. Immediately, he dived on the nearest guard and bit his face while simultaneously gouging his eyes. The guard's scream could be heard all over the building and sounded like a tortured animal. The other guards grabbed him and began to attack with batons, boots, fists, smashing him to bits, breaking bones and knocking him clean out. He had half the guard's face in his mouth as he hit the cold, hard floor. He was dragged all the way to a double-doored dungeon cell called the Freezer and left unconscious in a heap on the empty stone floor. Frank's next 3 months will be one of total isolation in the freezer. The cell was 12 feet long, 10 feet wide and 10 feet tall. It was a windowless concrete box, dark, dank and cold. The toilet was just a hole in the floor, the bed, a concrete slab, and 3 inches off the floor with no mattress, only one blanket, which smelt of shit, sweat and piss. It was covered in dry blood and other stains. No heating was present in the cell, only ice-cold stone. The walls dripped with condensation. It was like the sweat from fear, and it just ran down the walls like a million teardrops. There were no books, no papers, nothing to read or do. He was naked, no clothes to act as a cover, no shoes, nothing. His food and water were pushed under a small flap in the base of the door. No words were ever spoken by the guards. It was 3 months of silence and madness. His only excitement was to see the spiders and the cockroaches. He paced up and down for hours, ran on the spot, completed thousands of squats, jumps and press-ups, anything to make the time pass and not give in to the mental torture. He sung a lot, laughed out loud and spoke to himself. Some days he only slept as he felt so tired and disorientated. He soon realised they were drugging his food, the porridge and the soup especially, as it was not evident in the watery mix. But he had to eat to survive. He never washed, shaved or bathed. He couldn't. He smelt like a wild bear and began to look like a wild animal with each passing day. His eyes sunk into his sockets and his dreams became vivid nightmares. His thoughts were only of violence. His feet were now his weapons and from the floor became hard as rock. His fingernails had grown like talons. He was becoming more animal than human. His hair touched his shoulders and was matted in filth and lice. His teeth had changed to a yellow-brown colour without any chance of cleaning or care. There were days he believed the guards were coming to kill him. Paranoia set in so hard. So he rubbed his body in shit. If they were going to kill him, they would do it covered in his filth. Unbeknown to Frank, there were 14 other lunatics in Broadmarsh. It only held 20, but the others had died, some in mysterious circumstances. Broadmarsh had never any visits or mail of any kind. It was totally cut off from the world. The truth be known, these prisoners were long lost, forgotten souls. Their families disowned them. They feared for them and despised what they had done. All had murdered, some multiple times. They were all there by reason of insanity, and so they all escaped the death penalty. Some would say they were extremely lucky, but all of them now wish they had hung, as Broadmarsh was much worse than death. It was a living fucking nightmare at epic proportions. It breathed hate and despair. Most of these forgotten souls killed. Their crimes stayed a secret simply because the government decided it would be kept a secret. There was no trial. The public never needed to know. It would have caused a riot, so much pain for all concerned.
Wow. Fantastic.
And I'll leave it at that, yeah.
Grip and Darren Stark, he loved it. He says, I love that line, condensation ran down the walls like a million teardrops. So, fantastic, mate. It's very descriptive and, you know, it makes you feel as if you're in there, which is the sign of a good book. I mean, and you should do the audio book, Richard.
Yeah, well, you know, we always said about that, and Charlie was saying, oh, you know, we need to get somebody to do an audio book because it would be, you know, it would be gripping. We've tried to make sure we've put every imagery imaginable in it because, you know, we've lived and breathed Frankie Johnson now for the past 14 months, and we wanted to make sure when people read it, they're following him. You know, it's like you're in the room as a voyeur to Frankie as he sort of is in Broadmarsh, the treatment he gets, but as he's unleashed back when he escapes, not to give anything away, you know, you're following his mad journey. You know, it's a journey of insanity. You know, that this man has lost the plot until later on in the book. Like I said, he does have a little bit of compassion, which is most people will probably not believe. But I'm hoping that people will see, you know, we've described it as much as we can so people feel like it is real. And at the end of it, they can make their mind up whether he was a bad chap or it was just circumstance of his upbringing. And, you know, there's a bit of humour in it as well. It's bizarre, you know, when he's doing all these horrible crimes, there's still a bit of humour where he'll sit down and eat and laugh to himself. You know, as Charlie always said, it's insanity. It is insanity. And, yeah, we just hope people enjoy it. We're really proud of it, and we're really pleased the way it's come out. And I think with Charlie's artwork in there to sort of go in between the written textual information, it's something unique, and we think it's something special. And Yeah, I mean, it's nice that Darren said that quote. I remember him saying that to me after he read the book. He loved that quote about the condensation, and yeah, we've tried to put as much imagery as possible into the book to make it something different, and yeah, people can feel that they're actually there in that cell, dealing with what Frankie dealt with throughout those 3 months of being in them horrible conditions.
Yeah, you should be immensely proud of it. It's a fantastic book. It's a great novel. It's one that the crime fans will thoroughly enjoy, and you feel as if you're in there, but you get to know the character, and you go on that journey with Frankie. So it's well worth a read. You can get it on Amazon. Is there anywhere else that people can buy it direct? Can people get a hold of signed copies?
Yeah, what we've done is we've done a very limited edition of signed and numbered embossed copies. Straight from myself. Can contact me if they want to contact my email, which is richonebooth@hotmail.com. We have a few signed and numbered copies left. Charlie signed it by way of a sticker. There's a book plate in there, and I've signed copies. The numbered and embossed, and that sets it apart to the run-of-the-mill book that you can get through Amazon, which is exclusively sold through Amazon. But yeah, the numbered copies are something that we hope will be a collectible. And you've got a touch of mine and Charlie's in there as well. So yeah, it's released Monday. That's the worldwide release date. But I still have a few signed and numbered copies left if people want to snap them up before they all go.
It's a big day, not only for you guys with the book coming out, but also for Charlie on Monday. Can you explain what's going on?
Yeah, well, Charlie has his case heard in the court on Monday to see whether they will grant him a public parole. Charlie's long campaign for this, that he thinks that parole hearings are done in privately behind closed doors, and he feels that some of them really sort of have already been set in motion before the hearing takes place. So he wants them to be a lot more transparent, and he's fought for the last couple of years to get his parole hearing and others as well in public. So if this is passed on Monday and he gets granted that, it'll set a precedent then for everybody else to have the option to have a parole hearing in public as opposed to behind closed doors with the parole committee. And yeah, fingers crossed he will get that granted, which I think he will, because there was a hearing at the end of last year, which meant that the person who presided over that preliminary hearing felt that Charlie had a really good case, and there's no reason why certain ones, where possible, can be public. So fingers crossed, not only will we have the launch of our book Broadmarsh, but Charlie will hopefully win that case, and it'll become a landmark for any prisoner then who wants a public parole hearing where possible from that day forth. So yeah, I'm got everything crossed for Charlie, and hope that we'll have a double good luck on that Monday, the 15th this week coming.
If he does get out, how do you see the future panning out? Do you think he'll concentrate on his artwork?
Yeah, he said this all along. Like he said, he wants to have a life of anonymity. He doesn't want to be still known as Charles Bronson and all this. He wants to live out in the countryside in his little cottage or a caravan. He's got one set up ready to roll, and he just wants to do his art. That's what he wants to do. He wants to spend the rest of his life, breathing the fresh air, seeing the amazing scenery, and being inspired to produce more art. He said when he's out, he wants to change his art to be sort of like large oils on canvas, because obviously he's not had that good fortune to have oil paints in prison, nor a canvas. It's all been on paper and card. So he sees more challenges for himself as an artist. He wants to establish himself a little bit more and just do his art. He's got ideas of producing oil on canvases the size of prison doors. So they're going to be sort of like your 6 foot by 3-4 foot canvases, and he wants to do this most amazing art. He's got all this sort of good fortune to come, and he just cannot wait for the day he's released so he can spend time with his friends, visit places that he's had in his mind. We've got a little project on the boil when he's released of something that I won't go into, but we've got ideas. We're going to travel the country and produce a book of our sort of views of that, but he wants to do painting along the way, and yeah, that's been his long goal for many a year, and I just hope after this parole hearing he does get that granted so he can live the rest of his life out in freedom.
Fingers crossed, it'll be a great day when we see him come through those prison gates. I'm looking forward to that myself. And
yes.
Richard, once again, well done on a wonderful book. Just last chance for you to plug where people can get it and how people can contact you before we play out.
Yeah, of course. So Monday the 15th, this Monday coming, it's available on Amazon worldwide. You can go onto Amazon and type in Broadmarsh and the book's there to purchase. Also, if you want to contact myself direct at richonebooth@hotmail.com, I have a small number of signed and numbered editions left that you can get directly from me, and they will be a collector's items, I'm sure. So, yeah, I hope people go out and enjoy reading it. And don't forget, this is the first of a few bits of partnership books that Charlie and I have got coming over the next year or two.
Great stuff. Well done, mate. We're going to play out with a song which I know Charlie would appreciate. It's all in aid of the food bank. It's Krays the Lord. Richard Booth, thanks very much. Have a good day, mate.
Thank you, Steve.
This will help to make you happy, 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 happy. My friends, this will help to make you happy.